Transition Awareness Breathing. Feeling grounded for both children and parents is essential for healthy living and learning. Join Eartha Powell on this series for tips and tools for creating a harmonious environment for learning. Transition Awareness Breathing will help you and your child find an individualized path to tackle change, promote lifelong learning, and discover new approaches to calmness.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transition Awareness Breathing Podcast. This is Eartha, and I just want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join me for a few moments. Time, I really do value time. And so I hope that during our time together, you will go away with a new perspective of change, because that's what we're going to talk about. I'm getting my information from a lot of different sources, but the primary source that I'll be using today is from PositivePsychology.com. I really appreciate their articles because it really is very concise, it's short, and it fits the length of my podcast. So I hope this is helpful for you. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Web Talk Radio for allowing me to have a platform to bring Transition Awareness Breathing podcasts to you. And thank you to my producers, Mary Lou and Sam, for making Transition Awareness Breathing podcast available to my listeners everywhere they go. All right. Okay, so let's talk about change. I think what caught my attention on this article by PositivePsychology.com was the word change. Change is something that is pretty constant, whether we are aware of it or not. And so when I was deciding to name my program, I was trying to find a word that matched or kind of brought the same meaning as the word change. And so I came up with transition. And I came up with transition because I thought it was more of a positive spin on change. When we go through change or transitions, sometimes those changes are not easy. But if we look at the change, the transition represents a process. And so if we could understand the process of change, sometimes it makes going from one state of a situation to another state of a situation. It may not be easier, but we are able to understand what's going on. And so that way it allows us to adapt a little bit, not easier, maybe less painful, or we're less resistant to the change. A change can also cause excitement, and excitement is good. Sometimes if we're overly excited, this is what I tell my students, we can put ourselves in situations that's not safe. And so the transition part is what I work on when I'm working with like my students, my elementary school students, is that transition and trying to keep ourselves positive and calm. And we go through different programs and activities to learn how to strengthen our calmness. This article highlights another aspect of change. And the article is called Doors Closed, Doors Open. And when I read it, I thought, oh yeah, that is another aspect of change. I want to share it with my podcast listeners. So here we are. That was a long introduction to say that, right? Okay, bear with me, everyone. Okay, so yes, change is very constant. And was one thing that we can probably always look forward to, whether we are prepared or not, is that there's going to be some change going on around us. And the mindfulness skills of awareness helps us to identify change so that we can be aware of our mental and physical feelings and responses to those change, and we can adjust changes. So what kind of examples can you think of that you maybe have undergone some types of change or transition? So kind of think about that for a second. Maybe some examples. Losing a job, ending a relationship, moving on to a new place. Those are some top items. Sometimes if we lose something, we think of it as a loss. And in that loss, what we are doing is going through a change. It's a transition. And I think what this article is emphasizing is these changes sometimes make us feel, maybe that we're rejected or our big plans collapsed. And that's what makes it difficult to go through this process of change, because it affects our feelings, our emotions. We may have invested a lot of time, a lot of money in something, and all of a sudden, something doesn't work out. I can come up with a lot of personal examples myself. I can think of an example right now, and I'm still working through this change. And, it may not be very important, but have you ever been working on something on the computer? All of a sudden, your computer dies. That is, to me, it is I can't even put it into words. And you can't recover it. And so you have to start the project all over again. I've been through that a few times, and what I have learned is usually the final product, whatever I'm working on, is usually better. Also, what I learned is how to save my work on different things. And so I'm learning different, technologies to help save work, or so that I don't have all my work in one place. I have a plan B, so to speak. And so that's just, it's an example from my personal life that doors close, I've lost work, doors open, the final product is usually much, much better. And also, before I go on, I usually wind up asking someone for help, because it is at a point, usually these things happen, at a point where I am almost at a deadline, and I was at my, the last draft, and it's, and so I'm asking people. And so that's another thing that I have learned through that process, is that to include other people. It doesn't have to be a whole team, but a couple of other people that can help along the way to give some feedback on how to save work or whatever, we're working on. So that's my personal example. And now when I work on big projects, they're not scary, and I feel more positive about the projects that I work on. Our goal is two-part. The first part, in looking at doors closed and doors open, is to make us aware that when something ends, it's the beginning of something that is new. the end of something that is positive, it may be perceived as negative. You are involved in something and there's a lot of excitement or a lot of planning, and then the end comes near and there's a little bit of a letdown. But actually, it's a way that we can make room to create something new again. Our time together is to help us to become aware that our perspectives will change and we'll see things from a different point of view. And hopefully we can see a little bit better on what our changes are and what our transitions that we go through will make the future better. Another part of this time together, I hope that we can see that, as we reflect on doors closing, those what we might consider negative, what kept us in that negative state? What prevented us from going forward? And we don't want to stay there ruminating over, what kept us in that negative state, but just to put a flashlight and reflect on it so that we can move forward and see how we have grown stronger and more optimistic about the future, and look at that closing door as not a negative point, but a step. And as we step up, we're stepping towards something better. Okay. I'd like to share a little story with you before we go forward. When I talk about change and transition, I always think about my garden because it is a classic example of transition and change. So I think of my garden as like a mindfulness activity in itself. When I look at the seeds, they're just seeds. They're in the package, and the flowers or the vegetables. They look so pretty on the picture. And I wonder if my flowers or if my vegetables are going to look as good as those pictures. And then I start to reflect. I wonder if this season's garden is going to be just as good as last year's. And sometimes, we could just forget about some of the issues that we had with last year's garden because we keep having the same problems. The same bugs, the same dry soil. And so it's helpful to look at some of the negative things of the past in the garden so that we can improve for next season. And that's exactly what I did this season. So when I reflected that, I did have a few good vegetables, but they weren't the best. It seems like after the first picking, it was done. I knew it was the soil. And so this year, I spent a little bit more effort in preparing the soil, putting those nutrients in the ground, and then putting the seeds in. Now, the doors closed, the season is over. I planted the seeds, and they just looked like little seeds. But you and I know when those seeds go in the ground, those seeds have to rot. They decay. And that's just like when we go through different changes. When we go through different steps in life, we're leaving one state into another state. And so we're leaving, and the past it's decaying or it's changing because that shell has to come off. And that little seedling, it takes root into the ground. And now, as those roots travel through the soil, it finds that that soil is nutrient rich. And so we are nurturing and giving ourselves a chance to take care of ourselves, that self-care as we're going through change. Getting enough sleep, getting some exercise, getting outside and getting some sunshine, doing the best or maybe even better about what we eat, and looking at things from a positive point of view, that what we're going through is a process and we're not going to get stuck. So that's my garden analogy. So how can we make this a little bit more representative of what we are going through? Think about a time in your life when someone rejected you, or you missed out on an important opportunity, or big plans collapsed. I think about our time when we experienced COVID. A lot of plans collapsed. A lot of doors were closed. And because of those times, what happened? Well, unfortunately, a lot of lives were lost. Also, a lot of different ways to do things evolved. So think about some times, what happened after a door closed for you? What evolved? What got better? Think about those things. Reflect on that. And also, what were your strengths? What did you find was a characteristic of you that really, you surprised yourself? Were you find that you were more determined or more flexible? Did you find that you had to express and reflect your emotions? Maybe we don't usually take time to really get in touch with ourselves. What was easiest for you when you were going through that change, and what was more difficult? What kind of problem-solving skills and contingency plans did you have to come up with? And that's a part of the flexibility, because you kept going. It may have been slow and it may have been rough. And if you're going through a transition, which we all are, let's encourage ourselves and know that we're not the only ones out here going through something. Everyone has a story. Everyone has challenges. But you see, as we practice our mindfulness and awareness, we're going to be stronger and positive as we go through this, because we know that once we go through this transition, another door opens. As I bring our time together to a close, finally, think about the people who helped you during your time of transition. When the doors were closed, who was there? Who was there? What resources helped you? When the doors opened, how did you get that help? Who was there? And are you at a point that maybe you can be someone, that person, to help others and to feed that person some positivity or words of encouragement or whatever kind of help that helped you? Are you able to kind of pay it forward? Well, with that, I'll bring our time to a close. And I hope I've left you with some reflective thoughts. I look forward to sharing our time together next time. Have a great day.
Be sure and pick up a copy of Eartha's new book, Tab Mindfulness, Awareness and Coloring Activities in a Pandemic World. It's not just an ordinary coloring book. It features 23 illustrations to stimulate thought, relaxation, and creativity for anyone between the ages of 4 and 94. Increase your positive self-talk energy, unlock new creative paths, transform your time once or twice a week to create beautiful art while strengthening confidence, building positive self-talk, and sensitize self-awareness. Tab Mindfulness, Awareness and Coloring Activities in a Pandemic World. It's available now at Amazon.com.